Good morning, Carl. Now we comes the next one of our Beatrix Potter series. This one's called The Tale of Jemima Puddle Duck. What a funny sight it is to see a brood of ducklings with a hen. Listen to the story of Jemima Puddle Duck, who was so annoyed because of the farmer's wife would not let her hatch her own eggs. Her sister-in-law, Mrs. Rebecca Puddle Duck, was perfectly willing to leave the hatching to someone else. I have not the patience to sit on a nest for 28 days, and no more have you, Jemima. You would rather let them go cold, I know you would. I will hatch all my own eggs. I will hatch them all by myself, quacked Jemima Puddle Duck. Carl, you may recall Lazy the Mazy Bird and Horton hatches the egg at this point. She tried to hide her eggs, but they were all found and carried off. Jemima Puddle Duck became quite desperate. She was determined to make her nest right away from the farm. She set off one fine spring afternoon along the cart roads that leads over the hill. She was wearing a shawl and a poke bonnet. When she reached the top of the hill, she saw a wood in the distance. She thought it looked like a safe, quiet spot. Jemima Puddle Duck was not much in the habit of flying. She ran downhill a few yards, flapping her shawl, and she jumped off into the air. She flew beautifully when she got a good start. She skimmed over the treetops until she saw an open place in the middle of the wood, where the trees and the brushwood had been cleared. Jemima alighted rather heavily and began to waddle about in search of a convenient dry nesting place. She rather fancied a tree stump among some tall foxgloves. But, seated upon the stump, she was startled to find an elegantly dressed gentleman reading a newspaper. He had black prick ears and sandy-coloured whiskers. "Quack," said Jemima Puddle Duck, with her head on a bonnet on the one side. "Quack." The gentleman raised his eyes above the newspaper and looked curiously at Jemima. "Madam, have you lost your way?" said he. He had a long bushy tail which he was sitting upon, and the stump was somewhat damp. Jemima thought him mighty civil and handsome. She explained she had not lost her way, but she was trying to find a convenient dry nesting place. "Ah, is that so? Is that so indeed?" said the gentleman with the sandy whiskers, looking curiously at Jemima. He folded up the newspaper and put it in his coat-tail pocket. Jemima complained of the superfluous hen. "Indeed, how interesting. I wish I could meet with that fowl. I would teach it to mind its own business. I bet you would. But as to this nest, there is no difficulty. I have a sackful of feathers in my woodshed. No, my dear madam, you will be in nobody's way. You may sit there as long as you like," said the bushy long-tailed gentleman. He led the way to a very retired, dismal-looking house among the foxgloves. It was built of faggots and turf, and there were two broken pails, one on top of the other by way of a chimney. "This is my summer residence. You will not find my winter house so convenient," said the hospitable gentleman. There was a tumble-down shed at the back of the house made of old soap-boxes. The gentleman opened the door and showed Jemima in. The shed was almost quite full of feathers. It was almost suffocating, but it was very comfortable and very soft. Jemima Puddle Duck was rather surprised at such a vast quantity of feathers, but it was very comfortable, and she made a nest without any trouble at all. When she came out, the sandy-whiskered gentleman was sitting on a log reading a newspaper. At least he had it spread out, but he was looking over the top of it. He was so polite that he seemed almost sorry to let Jemima go home for the night. He promised to take great care of her nest until she came back again the next day. He said he loved eggs and ducklings. He would be proud to see a fine nestful in his woodshed. Now Jemima Puddle Duck came every afternoon. She laid 9 eggs in the nest. They were greeny white and very large. The foxy gentleman admired them immensely. He used to turn them over and count them when Jemima was not there. At last Jemima told him that she intended to begin to sit the next day, "And I will bring a bag of corn with me, so that I never need to leave my nest until the eggs are hatched. They might catch cold," said the conscientious Jemima. "Madam, I beg yourself not to trouble yourself with a bag. I will provide oats. Before you commence your tedious setting, I intend to give you a treat. Let us have a dinner party all to ourselves. May I ask you to bring some herbs from the farm garden to make a savory omelette, sage and thyme and mint, and 2 onions and some parsley. I will provide lard for the stuff. Lard for the omelette," said the hospitable gentleman with sandy whiskers. Jemima Puddle Duck was a simpleton, and not even the mention of sage and onions made her suspicious. "Carl, you know you make an omelette out of, guess what? Eggs, and sage and onion is usually what's used to cook ducks in, or geese. She went around the farm. So Jemima Puddle Duck went round the farm garden nibbling off snippets of the different sorts of herbs that are used for stuffing roast duck. And she waddled. What happened there? Sorry about that, we had a slight interruption. And she waddled into the kitchen and got 2 onions out of a basket. The collie dog kept met her coming out. What are you doing with those onions? Where do you go every afternoon by yourself, Jemima Puddle Duck? Now, Jemima Puddle Duck was rather in awe of the collie. She told him the whole story. The collie listened with his wise head on one side, and he grinned when she described the polite gentleman with sandy whiskers. He asked several questions about the wood and about the exact position of the house and shed. Then he went out and trotted down the village. He went to look for 2 foxhound puppies who were out at a walk with the butcher. Jemima Puddle Duck went up the cart road for the last time on a sunny afternoon. She was rather burdened by bunches of herbs and 2 onions in a bag. She flew over the wood and alighted opposite the house of the bushy, long-tailed gentleman. He was sitting on a log. He sniffed the air and he kept glancing uneasily round the wood. When Jemima alighted, he quite jumped. Come into the house as soon as you look for the eggs. Give me the herbs and the omelette. Be sharp. He was rather abrupt. Jemima Puddle Duck had never heard him speak like that. She was surprised and uncomfortable. While she was inside, she heard pattering of feet round the back of the shed. Someone with a black nose sniffed at the bottom of the door and then locked it. Jemima became much alarmed. A moment later, there was more awful noises, barking, baying, growls and howls, squealing and groans. And nothing more was ever seen of that foxy-whiskered gentleman. Presently Kep opened the door of the shed and let out Jemima Puddle Duck. Unfortunately, the puppies rushed in and gobbled up all the eggs before he could stop them. He had a bite in his ear and both the puppies were limping. And poor Jemima Puddle Duck was escorted home in tears on account of those eggs. She laid some more in June, and she was permitted to keep them herself, but only 4 of them hatched. Jemima Puddle Duck said it was her nerves, and she had always been a bad sitter. The end, Carl. I remember back in Cambridge, that's the other university where I did my PhD, there was a big, outside Magdalen College, we've got Magdalen over there, Magdalen here. Outside Magdalen College, we had a big swan's nest, and there were all these eggs sitting there, big, beautiful, round things, large as my hand, well, oval things, large as my hand. And I remember coming there to watch them one summer, and one day they were all hatched, and the swans had all gone off except one. There was one little egg that was a dud and was left all alone in the middle of the old nest, and my friend at the time was quite distraught about this. Well, I trust you've enjoyed this tale about the foxy whiskered gentleman, and see you tomorrow for the next one. Love you to pieces as always.